Hi, third grade. It's Mrs. McAllen. I am in my office in my home, which was my kids' nursery when they were babies. So I haven't changed it because I don't want to. As you can see, I have clouds on my ceiling, and in the background you can see that I have some poo things, some classic poo on my walls, and it just warms my heart to be here. So anyway, this week I get to read to you from our fabulous She Dared book, the autobiography of Bethany Hamilton. And today I'm going to start by reading chapter 6. So chapter 6, the title is Lights, Camera, Action. So I want you to think about what might be in this chapter, Lights, Camera, Action. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and start. I'm going to pick up where Mrs. Johnson left off. Before Bethany got back in the water, she'd have to get out of the hospital. Easier said than done. All the media and press wanted to do was sink their teeth into Bethany, all eager to get the first interview from the girl who survived a shark tank. She sat perched on the side of her hospital bed, surrounded by her family, ready to go home, anxious to go home. 2 hospital security guards stepped away from their post at Bethany's door and into her room. Ready? One said. Bethany nodded. Follow us, another said. Things only got weirder from there, and Bethany felt like the main character in a spy film. Instead of going out the front entrance of the hospital, what any normal person would do, Bethany and her family snuck through a maze of hallways. Then the security guards stopped at the back door of the hospital. From there, the only place to go was outside, but not home, as Bethany had hoped. Apparently, dozens of reporters were camped out on her front lawn, which was certainly not the best atmosphere for Bethany to rest and heal, something she needed to do as she wanted to be back in the water by Thanksgiving. The guards heaved the door open, light poured in. Though she couldn't go home, 2 police cars waited a few feet away, ready to take her to a family friend's house in Oahu Beach. Bethany fidgeted, not because of where she was going, but because of how she'd be getting there. She was already the girl with one arm. She didn't want to be the girl with one arm in the back of a cop car. Then she saw Blue Crush. The van's rust and chip paint had never looked so good. She was thankful to be riding in style to her friend's house. It was time for Bethany to heal, not only for her body, but also for her soul. What better way for that to happen but for Bethany's dog to surprise her at her friend's house, all 40 pounds of ginger, with her many Shar-Pei wrinkles, wiggled with excitement at seeing Bethany. Bethany was more than happy to wrap her arm around her. For the first time since being bitten by the shark, Bethany cried, but they were happy tears. The next day, a nurse came to change the dressing on her wound, and Bethany prepared herself. So far, she hadn't looked or so much as peeked at what was left of her arm. She did now. Oh my gosh, she thought. The room spun and she tried not to faint. It was a lot worse than she'd imagined. I look like Frankenstein. Long black stitches held her stump of an arm together. Right then and there, Bethany knew she'd need help from someone much bigger than herself to get back into the water. Bethany needed to rely on her faith. She took a deep breath and reminded herself that she would surf again just as soon as those ugly stitches were out. And with the requests for interviews pouring in, it was clear everyone wanted to hear about Bethany's returning to the water. Oprah 2020, Inside Edition, Ellen DeGeneres, Peter Jennings, Life Magazine, Sports Illustrated, The Early Show, Good Morning America, Today, CNN Live, and a slew of others. They all wanted Bethany's story. She wasn't eager to tell it. That meant reliving the moment. That meant making herself uncomfortable by being in the spotlight. Well, thankfully, her parents didn't push her. About 2 weeks later, after the stitches came out and her arm looked less Frankenstein-y, Bethany rubbed her lips together, debating about the interviews. And after some deliberation, she decided that she'd do it. She'd tell her story. The way Bethany looked at it, there could be other people facing a similar situation. Not similar in the sense that they were also bitten by a shark, but that they may be facing an obstacle that feels almost impossible, where they have to bear the odds as she had. Bethany believed she had survived because God had a plan for her. She had had one condition in agreeing to do any interviews. Bethany wanted to be open about her faith. She started with an interview with 2020. Like a small army, the production crew arrived in Hawaii and traipsed all around her hometown and beaches with their cameras. They were at it for hours and hours. Chris Kumo, the journalist who was going to interview her, also chatted with Dr. Ravinsky, her parents, the Hanoi Bay girls' surf team, some locals, and even Ralph Young, the man who caught the shark. The whole process was surreal and felt a bit staged. Every shot was planned to get the best angle, the best light of the day, the best scenery. At one point, the crew filmed Bethany walking on the beach, her green dress flapping in the breeze. It was pretty awkward, knowing the cameras were on her, but she tried to look as natural as possible. At her house, Chris followed her around her bedroom, which normally had stuff all over her floor, but today her room was organized, and she shared memories and pointed out some of her favorite things, such as a huge trophy she'd won during a competition. They even asked her to make a fruit smoothie, probably to show how she had adapted over the past few weeks to having only one arm. So she whipped it up and felt proud about how she'd gotten pretty good at doing little things for herself. Bethany found ways to improvise, such as holding things like the fruit while she chopped it between her clean feet. When it was time for the interview, Bethany wanted to keep it casual. Hair down, shorts, and a tee, showing off Stumpy, the nickname she'd given her arm. And Bethany was barefoot. Indoors, that's how it's done in Hawaii. Rubber slippers or flip-flops, as non-Hawaiians call them, stay outside. For the interview, lights, cameras, and microphones filled her living room. At the center of the room, Bethany and Chris sat facing each other in 2 wicker chairs. The funny and uncomfortable thing was how the chairs were super close together. Their knees were almost touching, but Bethany guessed it was easier to get both of them in the same shot that way. It was also funny that Chris, this big fancy reporter, had his sleeves rolled up, his legs crossed, and was also barefoot. That put Bethany more at ease because the whole being interviewed thing was a little scary, as you can imagine. At least it wasn't live TV. For this interview, they'd record the whole thing and later edit out her more awkward moments when she blankly stared, not sure how to answer, or gave one-word replies. When it was all said and done, after filming all day, the entire broadcast would be only 10 minutes long, including all the footage they took of her island, her friends, and her family. She could do this. Just answer a few questions, she told herself. Turned out, Chris had a ton of them, asking another question as soon as she answered one. Where were you? What were you doing? How did it feel? Were you scared? How do you feel now? Sad, angry, shell-shocked? Whoa. Chris was only doing his job, and he was nice about it. But the string of questions felt like an interrogation, and she fidgeted a lot. She did her best to make eye contact, something that was hard for Bethany when she was being put on the spot. To answer his last question about how she felt now, she said, "Well, I think that I should just have a positive attitude toward things and the challenges coming up. And if I had a bad attitude, then it's not really going to make anything better." Chris nodded, impressed with her strength. During the attack, was there ever a moment where you started to panic? She pulled both feet into her seat in a butterfly position, her knees pointed at the ceiling. Not really. I think I figured out that if I panicked, then things wouldn't go as good as if I was calm. Like I was praying to God to help me and rescue me. Do you think that for yourself you need to get back in the water, back onto the board? She gave one of her sly smiles. Well, if I don't get back on that board, I'll be in a bad mood forever. He laughed, but then grew more serious. Do you think you're going to surf again? Bethany shifted, one leg dangling over the side of the wicker chair. Her ankle moved in a circular motion. On the outside, she may have seemed uncomfortable, but it was being interviewed and not the question that made her feel that way. Bethany confidently looked Chris in the eye. I think, she said, I know I'm going to surf again. Competitively, she added in her head, but she was getting ahead of herself, one step at a time. First, Bethany needed to see if she could paddle, stand up, and balance herself on a board. Then she'd take it from there. At the very least, she was excited to try. Lucky for her, Thanksgiving, the day she said she'd get back in the water, was only a few days away. So that's it for chapter 6, guys. You'll hear from me again when I read chapter 8, because Mrs. Taylor is going to read chapter 7 to you. All right. Bye, guys. I'll talk to you soon.